Hi, I'm Casey.
I'm Drew. We're the husband and wife team, two nomadic hearts from Bend, Oregon.
We are Air Force veterans and were both medically separated in 2018. Drew and I plan on traveling to 16 different veteran homes over 13,000 miles circling the United States.
Our current mission is to interview both active and veterans of all wars for the United States, bridging the gap between the two. This is their story. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming. This is one of Casey and I's dearest friend, Kenneth Durbin. He kind of a rock star. Just follow the intro, but welcome, Kenneth, to their story. Pleased to have you.
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the government names.
Okay, so Kenny Durbin, what is your call sign?
Kentucky Durbin.
Kentucky Durbin.
Yeah, call sign's Tucky.
Okay. Cool. So as everybody knows, the rule is you have to have a beer to understand the call sign, so I won't go beyond that. That's your secret and your secret alone.
It's all right, dude. Cheers to that.
Cheers. So question number one, where did you grow up?
All right, man. So I grew up in a couple different cities in the Bay Area of California. A lot of places that weren't the best, some of the places that were pretty good. But I basically call Fremont where I grew up. It's where I finished out junior high school and high school.
What were you like in high school?
Oh man, this is my wife's favorite thing. So growing up with a little bit of inner city influence, I was definitely far different than I am today and far different than I was in college. It just goes with the growing pains. But dude, I loved being all part of any kind of sports I can get my hands on. And then I had the opportunity to have a couple decent teachers in high school that I guess believed in me a little bit more than the rest. And so they kind of got me into a little bit of the leadership scene and a couple more of the academic extracurriculars, which really helped me on down the road.
Okay, so during this time, family life, explain kind of your structure.
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom and dad divorced when I was really young, and then my mom had a second kid. My sister, she's 10 years younger than me, and she's awesome. Her name's Tabitha. And so we kind of grew up with two different households. But obviously together and very close. My parents got to live fairly close to each other since about the age of 12 across the Bay Area. So I got to basically see them for the most part as I wanted to growing up. Mainly stayed with my mom until I was in junior high, and I was able to go to a better school district, a better junior high school. So then I moved in with my dad because that's kind of the zoning it was for. And I got to live with him until I went to college.
Okay. So it sounds like you faced a little bit of adversity there in high school.
Yeah, a little bit. It was more so through the elementary and junior high years. Me and mom moved around quite a bit. Obviously single mother in the Bay Area, which, surprise, surprise, 20 years ago, it was just as hard to live there as it is now. We definitely had a few rough patches as we had our good patches as well.
So what did you want to be when you grew up?
Man, that's a great question. I honestly had no idea. I knew that I wanted to be something, which sounds cliche and kind of funny, but I wanted to do something that obviously was a passion, something that was fun, something that provided me a life, a living as well, right? With a little bit of military influence from my uncle, it kind of led me down that path. And then obviously, as we all know, September 11th kind of made us all have the Superman syndrome, right?
Sure.
Make bad guys go away kind of thing. And that kind of really also persuaded me a lot more to continue looking down the military route. Still unknown what I was going to do or what I wanted to do.
So sports, during this period of time, when did you start looking into the military, and then how big of a role did sports play into that leadership desire that you had?
Yeah, the sports role was mainly based in football and then a little bit in track, baseball, wrestling, things like that. But a lot of it, obviously.
So four-sport athlete.
Well, just trying to get anything I could. And then fun fact, I did a little mascotting as well when I wasn't playing sports, just to make sure I could go to games for free, right? It was really one of those things where obviously I love the physical piece of it. I love the challenge, and then the leadership amongst your peers, almost in in a challenging environment was really somewhere I thrived, and that kind of played into as I got into like the high school leadership roles of like student body and things like that as well.
Okay. So you ended up going to Oregon State. What was that decision, and how did you start your collegiate career?
Man, this is actually kind of funny. I'll break it down super quick for you. I actually was thinking about going and just kicking down doors and enlisting in like the Army, the Marines, whatever was going to take me at the time, fresh out of high school, start making a paycheck and travel the world. And I actually had a AP U.S. history teacher who was a retired Navy intel officer, and he basically said, "Hey man, you got a little bit more going on between the ears. Why don't you go look at this ROTC thing? And if you do this ROTC, all the ROTC applications, all 4 of them for OTC, I'll give you a bunch of extra credit," which basically gave me a B for the semester. So I said, "This is a great gig," and so of course I went home that weekend and did the applications, printed them out and everything. Brought them in that next Monday, and was like, smooth sailing. See you later. And he actually stuck to his word, which is really cool. And long story short, man, I got a couple of the offers, and it made me want to go to college fresh out of high school, which was kind of not the route I saw myself going down. And so I went to a college night at Oregon State, at my high school, and the first table I saw was an orange and black school. My high school was orange and black, and sure enough, it was Oregon State, and the lady had not only talked to me about Pac-12, Pac-10 football back then, and filled in the blank of like things about college, which I really didn't know or care about because it was still so foreign to me, right? Don't come from a lot of college graduates in my family per se. And then
just
she
young too, a kid, yeah.
And then she kind of told me about when I told her that I had a potential for ROTC. She said, "Let me tell you this. There's a walkway, and it goes diagonally through campus, and that thing, it is sitting right in the middle of campus. And every Thursday, all the ROTC guys get to get in their uniform, and they get to march down this walkway. And let me tell you, when it's not raining, the people line up, guys, girls, anything." Well, there's a few things about that I found to be true, and a few things I found to be very false about that. But no joke, even it doesn't sound like it's that far away, but in 2007, I filled out a paper application right there at her table, handed it to her. I left right then and told my dad I was going to Oregon State.
That's awesome, man. So then did you get the high school scholarship program, the HSPS program, your freshman year going in?
Yes. Yeah. So I was able to get a high school scholarship. The bummer part was it was out of state, right? So it only covers 3 or 4 years. So your first year is kind of like an experimental year anyway. But yeah, so that's what I showed up with. I showed up on campus with a pocket full of federal dollars, 3 duffel bags, and no idea where to go or who to talk to or anything, because I showed up off the Hut shuttle from PDX.
So then your country roots, as far as one of our favorite bars is Jack O'Coley's, and kind of in college there is a tradition to get wings, and kind of the starter of all that was Mr. Durbin himself. He was also the DJ there, part bouncer, part bartender. So how did that all go down? And also I want to know a little bit about your football career.
So I'll start with Jack O'Coley's. So it was one of those awesome like family owned places where all they knew was like their friends and family that ran their business with them and for them. And I was kind of a new guy and an outsider, but I had a little bit of serving experience, a little bit of bartending experience from summers in college, and then previous before going to college, holding the job at the mighty fine Red Lobster. And and so when I got hired there, basically the mantra was you started from the bottom and you work your way up, and part of that is you work every position in the restaurant, in the bar, as a bouncer, everything. And you worked your way up to eventually you're kind of like lead bartender. And so as part of that, I got to do some bouncer work, aka checking IDs at the door in the winter in Oregon, which was not as terrible as it sounds, but it wasn't as great as it sounds either. And then I got to try my hand at a little bit of line cook action, and then I actually got the opportunity to the owners were kind of looking for things to do or nights to host per se, And we obviously had a very, very, very successful Western Wednesday going on in Corvallis.
The most successful Western Wednesday in all of Corvallis.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
turn the plate
down. Then I said to myself, well, if Western Wednesday is successful, everyone knows in college that Thirsty Thursday is a thing. Well, why can't we turn Thursday into something else as well? Because this bar, I mean, it was just a super open layout with this massive dance floor. So why not potential leads to money? So I thought that was an okay idea. And so me and a couple of the other bartenders kind of put our nuggets together, and sure enough, Buckin' Thursday was born, and we started teaching line dancing and all kinds of stuff.
It was awesome. It was like a never-ending party from Wednesday to Saturday. I loved it. It was the best. All right, cool. So then I think the next big thing that we need to clarify is you are an F-16 fighter pilot.
Yes, that's true.
Yes. What model do you fly?
So it's the F-16C. Right now we're flying the Block 25. It's one of the older models. She's got a little seasoning on her.
Okay. And how many hours do you have in the F-16?
I'm just shy of 1,000, so I got about 920-ish right now.
Okay. Yeah, so fair to say, quite the shmee, subject matter expert. Coming out, if I was an 18-year-old kid, explain me the steps that I would need to take to become a fighter pilot.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of decent data, and I have probably some dated data as well. So your best bet is to hit the old Google machine up and start looking for yourself. But here's what I think I know. So the first part is becoming a commissioned officer in whatever branch you wanted. And part of that has to do with going to college and picking up a 4-year degree and being able to prove that you have basically a bachelor's. It doesn't really matter what it's in. The college degree is the first step, and then getting your commission through multiple different avenues is the next step. I did the ROTC route, was able to commission in college. Basically, the classes ran concurrently, and got to hang out with you guys a lot. And once you get through that piece, essentially based on quite a few aspects of who you are and what you did in those years leading up to it, you essentially get a score, and that score is based on basically your aptitude. And the higher you score, the more options open up for you as far as jobs and basically job trainings, because even though you might be awarded a pilot leaving college, you still have to earn that piece and go through the training. So once you get through that, you are commissioned, you have accepted a job, you've been nominated for a job, what have you, and then you're able to go through the trainings and kind of show what you got, because everything up to this point has basically been college credits and then assumed aptitude. You actually have shown nothing as far as military proficiency up to this point.
Okay. And then what? So you take the TBAS, you go, and then you are essentially ranked amongst your peers for who goes to what kind of school, correct? For rated slots?
Yep, absolutely. And essentially across the rated slots, basically the operators and the flyers, is where you'll be placed or where you fall. And then based on that is where you get to go to your training. So for me, I got to go to pilot training. I got to go to Shepherd Air Force Base and train with some of our NATO partners and stuff like that. It's pretty neat. And based on how you do there.
So full disclosure here, I need to stop them here. So rewind it back to where we were at. So when you get racked and stacked with your peers, there's 3 like rated slots typically. We address that. And then for those that go pilot, there is a Rockstar version, and then there's like every man old version. You go to Del Rio. I went to Del Rio, and Mr. Rockstar here went to what we call is ENJJPT, which is European NATO Joint Pilot Training.
Yeah, Euro NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training.
There you go. So ENJJPT. So that's in Wichita Falls, Shepherd Air Force Base. And what was that experience like?
Man, it was kind of eye-opening, right? Because you go from how I grew up in the Bay Area, and everything we had available to us, to rural northwestern America, right? The great Pacific Northwest. Yeah. And then we make the 3-day haul down to Shepherd, and it's basically right there on the Red River. Never been to Texas before, never lived in Texas for sure. But it was one of those kind of cool.
You got your line dancing though.
Yeah. It was one of those cool spots that not only did it have like a small town feel, but not like a small town abandonment, like there was, more than one store to go to, that kind of stuff. But with all of the NATO partners there, it was actually like, it was one of those things where you got a very familial feel to it, very much so.
And what does that mean by other NATO partners? So that means you like, who are your classmates?
Yeah. So my class specifically had Germans in it. We had 4 Germans that they come over and they start with us and they graduate with us. And they, instead of going, for example, to fly an American aircraft, they go and fly a German aircraft. And part of that partnership with NATO is not only do we bring international students in, but there's also international instructors there as well. And specific to Shepherd, we had international T6 instructors, which is the first aircraft we fly, and then international T-38 instructors as well. And that was all part of what we did there. And that's kind of why, like, if you could just imagine being an international student showing up and now you're in middle of nowhere, Wichita Falls, which no disrespect to Wichita Falls, but it's probably middle of nowhere compared to where they're from. And you're expected to perform in a high aptitude in a very difficult program. They lean on, obviously, some of their superiors and some of their instructors, just like we do here in America. And so the vibe there and the energy was really cool because it was more of a bring everyone together and let's learn and be the best we can kind of vibe, as opposed to a kind of figure it out and what you see in the movies, right? And us versus them.
A difference between standard undergrad pilot training and ENJPT is, correct me if I'm wrong, but after T6's phase 1, everyone goes to the T-38, which is the fighter course. Is that still current? Do you know? Yeah,
so at Shepherd, there is no T1s there. There's no helicopters or anything. It's straight from T6s into T-38s.
So then if you want to be a fighter pilot, your best route and more of the guarantee is if you want to get a fighter slot, ENJPT is the preferable route. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, man, I had, based on like what stories and everything I heard from my peers and my buddies going through pilot training, if I hadn't gone to ENJPT or hadn't gone to Shepherd, I'm pretty sure I probably wouldn't have made it through. Because part of going there is the ENJPT syllabus and the ENJPT evaluations all have to match up to what NATO also agrees to. So for example, what an American-only base is doing, or what an American-only base has set a precedent in, the Shepherd or the NATO way may have diverged a little bit away from that. And there was definitely a few times where I cashed in those karma savings for sure.
Sure, yeah. Okay. This is a good follow question then, because I am curious. I never had to do it. What would be your best way of describing the jump from a T6 to a T-38 to an F-16?
So the T6 to T-38 was kind of eye-watering. It's a lot easier in some ways, but then it speeds up a lot faster in other ways. I remember it being more of a mental hurdle than like an actual feeling or an actual like physical thing that was going on. Obviously you're flying faster, but your decision making, your thought processes, the things that you did left hand, right hand, they weren't as drastic as the mental perception led it to be. Now when you jump from the T-38 to the F-16, it was kind of like, I always compare it to like your T-38 is like your Civic that you had in high school that like maybe you spent a $200 paycheck on to throw like, I don't know, some sweet new intake on and, throw 5 extra horsepower or something ridiculous into it, right? And then, of course...
0 to 30.
Yeah,
really
dude, they're just going like, skeet skirting around the block and feeling like you knew what you had. And then your F-16 is like your highly, highly tuned road machine where they're both cars, they both have 4 wheels, they both got a motor, but they are very different. And that's kind of my jump from T-38s to F-16s, I feel like was much more difficult.
So then back to the sports question, how do you think that sports correlates to everything that you've experienced so far in the military, especially with like your relationships with your peers?
I mean, dude, it's all based in adversity, right? Through adversity, we get stronger. And through a common enemy, we find unification even in the worst situations, right? And I think that's a huge player in all of this. I would venture to say that the ability to participate in sports, I should say, it wasn't necessarily the act of participating in sports, it's the act of adding onto your plate. You weren't just, for example, being a student, you weren't just doing this or doing that. You also had extracurriculars, and part of that is learning how to prioritize, learning how to balance things. I think that plays tremendously into what we do.
Did you, how did you manage ROTC and coming in, and your experience on the football team your freshman year? You came in as the long snapper, right? And then
my very good buddy who was the backup punter at the time lived with us on the same dorms, and he's now an Air Force PJ, which is awesome. But for some reason, was gifted with this insane talent to just long snap on a dime. Don't know why, but I can just make it happen. And so I was out there practicing with him one day in the parking garage, and he goes, "Man, you snap okay. Like, it doesn't suck." And so he actually introduced me to the special team coach at the time and gave me basically an ad hoc tryout, like in the hallway of the facility. And sure enough, he was like, "Well, I can't start you this year. I can't play you this year," because we had like a 5th-year medical redshirt type super senior or whatever. He's like, "But let's get some pounds on you, and let's get you ready for next year." So I was obviously ecstatic.
Yeah, and then you had to make a decision essentially with ROTC.
Dude, the rubber meets the road, and I go with who pays my tuition bills, really, right? And where my future was. My future was not in long snapping, and part of the ROTC gig is you got to maintain the height and weight standards of the Air Force at the time. And I was sitting at about just shy of 240, built like a brick house, and I needed to be about 202, and there was no waiver process to get around that. And so before I even put on my first practice jersey, actually, I walked up and said, "Coach, I'm done, man. I'm gonna go do this Air Force thing."
So your first experience out of ENJJP, you drop F-16s. Where was your first assignment?
So my first assignment was to the B course, what we call the basic course, and it was to Luke Air Force Base here in Phoenix, back where I'm at right now. Everyone goes back to the homeland, right? And that's where I got to go through the first 9 months of training of learning everything from the systems all the way through flying through just about every mission the F-16 does.
Okay. And it's hard to understand, I think, from my perspective. As a heavy guy, we don't really have anything. But for the fighter community, I hear that B course is really like a UPT 2.0, right? Like, it's very, very difficult, and it's also kind of the make or break of making a team. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And to frame it in the stage of a UPT 2.0, I would say that when you come down to like a fighter mission or a fighter set of missions, it absolutely does, because much like UPT, it teaches you every aspect of the basics, which is multifaceted. That is assumed, and now you get to go through every mission set, and that's where that, like, basically just when you think you are cresting the hill, there's a bigger hill right behind it kind of thing. That's kind of how it goes.
What is the standard squadron setup? If I'm the first kid, I just graduated B course, now I'm finally in a squadron, what is that structure breakdown like, and what can I expect?
Yeah, man. So you're going to walk into a squadron, and every squadron basically revolves around 3 places. First place is going to be the DO's office. The director of operations, basically number 2 in charge. That guy runs that place. He runs it through the scheduling shop and multiple schedulers that work there and develop every weekly and monthly long-range type schedules as well. The second place is going to be the ops desk, or the step desk as some call it. That place is where we have all of our up-to-date weather information, we have all of our up-to-date airfield information, and that's where we get our last bits and pieces of information that we need to fly for that day, to include what jets we're getting, parking spots, things like that nature. And that is where everyone shows up, gets their last data, grabs the last piece of gear, and then they leave the building or step out of the building, hence why it's called a step desk. And then the third place is going to be the bar, or as some have to call it, the heritage room. And that is just basically our break room. You'll oftentimes find, just your standard snack bar, You'll have microwaves, fridges, things of that nature as well. What you're really going to be greeted with is typically the commander's secretary is normally like the heart and soul of every fighter squadron. And she or he is normally going to be the first one to greet you, normally with a big smile. And they typically set up their desks very close to the main hallway or right in front of the front door. So that's normally the first smiling face you see. And they're kind of the one who leads the blind to start off every piece of that. The other shops, as we call them, or offices. Basically, if you move past scheduling, now you need to move into a training shop, which is in charge of all of our currencies and all of our required training, monthly, weekly, yearly, what have you. And then you move into our standards and evaluation, or StanEval, and that is where basically you start to look into where everyone is held to the same standard, the same proficiency as far as what the squadron or the wing or big Air Force holds each career field to. And then the last piece of any fighter squadron is going to be what we call the vault. The vault is our classified area. It's basically just more offices and computers and things like that, and that's where most folks get their briefings done, a lot of their studying and things like that. And so that's the nuts and bolts of a fighter squadron.
It sounds pretty intimidating on your first day.
Yes, it definitely could be. If you're not used to operating that way, it could be. It would be the same thing as like stepping into an Amazon distribution warehouse on your first day without ever stepping into any distribution warehouse and being confused by like 300 yards of conveyors going every which way.
Totally
right?
Makes sense. Yes. How important is it to be able to make good popcorn as a new fighter pilot?
Well, it depends on if you're a young guy or an old guy, but as any young guy will tell you, it is wildly important. And surprisingly, no matter how many good young guys show up to the squadron before you, there's actually never a really good recipe. Most of it is by eyesight, most of it is by smell, and most of it is like, yeah, it's about right. And so you tend to fail forward, which we do a lot. But eventually it pans itself out and it turns out to be a pretty fantastic asset.
Okay, you heard it from the man. Learning how to make popcorn is just as
No.
important as flying itself. So this is really fun because I showed up to Oregon State as an old grouchy guy, and Casey had already been in with Durbin, so they knew each other. And I actually grew up with Stephanie and her sisters as like a little kid. So when they ended up meeting each other and dating, that was in college, and that's when I found out who Durbin was, and that was kind of the introduction to all of that. But hi, Steph, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. How did you two meet?
I think that Kenny tells the story the very best. We lived on the same floor in the dorms in college, and his story, I'll just let him tell it.
Well, I mean, part of the follow-on to showing up to college and being blissfully lost with all your belongings hanging from your shoulder is eventually you find your dorm, right? And part of that dorm process is figuring out who you're living with and what the living situation is, especially when it was this foreign to me. So actually, I had no idea that it was a co-ed dorm and co-ed floors, right? And so I would probably say around day 2 or day 3 is about the time that the non-military students on that floor started showing up for like a few activities before school had actually started, tours and what have you. And so all of us grouchy military folks that have been, beaten to hell at this point and exhausted in these new facilities, all of a sudden normal people started showing up. I shouldn't say normal, but like people that were not in the military, people that wanted to talk about other things besides 4 a.m. wake-ups and how many push-ups I did that day, which we all know is fake because we don't do push-ups in the Air Force anyway. But anyway, all of a sudden a few females show up, and I'm like, okay, they must be visitors. And sure enough, through talking with them and introducing myself, they live there. And so this college thing got even better. And Steph just happened to be the wicked cute blonde that lived down the hall. And on like her second day there, she just happened to get outside of her comfort zone with her roommate and go meet, the probably 40, 50 folks that lived on the floor. And I was kind of smitten ever since then.
Wow, rest is history. So
I didn't know that. That's
yeah,
so cute.
It is really cute. So Casey and I were able to go to Japan in the previous video, and all of the suggestions that we had and places that we visited in Yokota all came from Stephanie.
Yay.
They were able to live in Japan for a period of time, and I want to know all about that. So what was it like for you two to, how long had you been married when you got to Japan, and what ended up happening when you were in Japan?
So we had been married for 3 years when we moved to Japan, like 3.5-ish almost years. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah. And we had a 4-month-old when we moved to Japan. And if you're looking for something fun to do, have a baby while your husband's in the B course. I can't recommend it enough. It's really fun. And so we moved there with our 2 dogs and Charlie, who was 4 months at the time. And it was different is all. I was not a fan, honestly, when I first got there. It was all a lot. I didn't like seafood. I still don't like seafood, which is like a slap in the face to where we lived because it was all so fresh and delicious. And you drive on the opposite side of the road and the opposite side of the car. So it was all a lot of change right off the bat, I guess.
It was by far the most drastic country I think we ever been to, where like there is no trying to connect to your culture. It's like you either take it or leave it. Like, yeah. This is what we speak. This is how you read. What was that like? Your first couple weeks with like a 4-month-old baby trying to figure out how to get downtown and buy groceries?
Yeah. So luckily there's a grocery store on base, and for the longest time I only shopped there because I was just kind of not willing in the beginning to step out of my comfort zone. So we stayed on base. I'm pretty sure Kenny chauffeured me around for as long as possible. Like I would just try and plan anything I had to do when he was home so that he could drive us because we got there at the end of October. So snow had not come yet, but it was on its way. And we just kind of stayed close to the base. I remember the very first time I went off base by myself with our daughter, we went to like a Hachinohe's, like 45 minutes away or so, and Kenny could not believe that I actually like left the base by myself and went shopping and then came back. But it was great, and it's really about nice. I learned it's like your attitude towards it, because once I was like, this is going to be fun, instead of like, oh my gosh, something here, like this is terrifying, it was just amazing. The whole entirety of Japan is amazing. The people, the places to go, like the communities, everything like that was just the best.
And the one thing that
that's so awesome.
Yeah, the one thing that she's leaving out just a little bit is we got there right as the 14th Fire Squadron, the Samurai, our first squadron, Wood to the Bros. They had just gotten back from a very successful deployment, but a very long deployment. So you can imagine showing up merely days after the boys get back. We show up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed with a 4-month-old and being pretty needy. And they kind of, they were like, dude, we just went through a little bit. Give us some time. We'll bring you into the fold. But right now, we need to focus on us now. And so that only added to a little bit of the hardship and isolation, which totally flip-flopped mere months after we got there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. So that is kind of an interesting dynamic. So that squadron, when they deploy, does everybody go?
Oh yeah. Most of the jets go. The whole maintenance contingent goes. The whole squadron goes. We have, and that's kind of how majority how F-16 squadrons are built as far as manning and jets and things of that nature. There are some larger squadrons that can afford to not send everything and everyone. But they took every single person who is assigned, and they took almost everyone who was attached, at least for 2 to 3 months at a time.
Okay. Wow. So you showed up to an empty house. So, Steph, how long was it in Japan till you started to feel comfortable, especially with Charlie? And what was it like for Charlie growing up in her first words and everything? Did she kind of have a mix of both languages, or how did you guys decide to raise her?
I mean, really, with it being our first kid, we didn't know any difference. So I don't really have much to speak to, like raising her in Japan versus America. But it was amazing because the Japanese culture is just so inclusive. So I wasn't ever nervous to take her anywhere. A lot of times, one of their words that they use a lot is kawaii, and that means cute. So anytime you go anywhere, prepare to hear kawaii all the time if Charlie is with you, because she was the cutest little green-eyed, blonde-haired baby, super friendly. And they would always, something that I had to get used to is the Japanese women love to take her from you. Like, there was no asking. It was just like you'd walk in and they'd be like, oh, kawaii, kawaii, and take her. And you're like, is this okay? And then you kind of learn, like, it's just cultural. They hold her. And even like the ladies who worked at the commissary on base, I would walk in and they would kind of fight over who would get to hold her while I shopped. So it was kind of nice because they would hold her. She would scan people's groceries. So it was great. Like, they were amazing. And she went to, when she got older, you have to be 18 months old. And she actually went off base to Hyoku. And that stands for, do you remember?
Cute bird?
Little chick.
There it is.
So that's like their like preschool essentially.
I have no idea.
So she went to Hyoku, and it was very, very different than like school or daycare in America. They have to wear indoor shoes when they go, and they had to wear, like, you had to buy smocks, and they had to have different kind of clothes for inside and outside, because it didn't matter if it was raining or snowing or really hot. Like, they were going outside to play during their outside time. And you had to pack them, the cutest thing, I thought, a scoop of white rice. So that way they had rice for whatever home-cooked meal or school-cooked meal they had that day. And they helped potty train, which I thought was amazing for us, because they...
Wow.
That is really
and it was...
That's crazy.
We could never get Charlie to fall asleep unless she was in her crib, and they are magicians and were able to get, like, I don't know, 10... 18-month-olds to sleep on their nap mats, like, all lined up. It was insane. So
That's impressive.
Like
it was, and they would pat their back, so you just like walk in. If you walked in during nap, it was like, and you just hear this, you're like, okay, but it was so cute, and it was completely in Japanese, so they spoke no English there.
Zero English.
You had to hire a translator.
So did she learn
So she
Japanese?
understands
Did she
just a
speak?
couple words, and she probably understood more than what we knew, because, I mean, she was in school all day, and it was only in Japanese. You had to hire a translator. That way they could, if they needed to, something happened, they would call the translator to call you. But every day I'd pick her up and I'd just be like, good, bad, good, and they would just go, good, kawaii, all the time. So it was great. I loved it. It was a wonderful place to raise a kiddo for sure. Fighter pilot wife expectations. I didn't have any. We didn't know anyone who was a fighter pilot at all. So I guess I went into it with no expectations. Like I said, we had our first baby in the B course, so that was a pretty quick transition from UPT, where we loved to have friends over and loved to celebrate things, and then you go to B course where you have a baby and you're kind of like, oh, okay, this is a lot different. So as far as how it actually is, I think it kind of depends on the CAF, the Combat Air Force, versus like right now AETC is what he's in. And AETC is?
Air Education and Training Command.
That.
Yeah. It's training.
So in the CAF, the Combat Air Force, that's where we were with Masawa, and they were gone all day, like 14-hour days, longer sometimes. We were lucky that while we were there, they had to work on the runway every summer. So coincidentally, my sweet, sweet husband got to be gone all summer. The entirety we were there, to awful, awful places like Australia, and where else was it so awful you went to? Guam, just the worst.
That wasn't in the summer, but you get the point.
And they would also coincidentally be gone. It snowed Aomori Prefecture is like the snowiest city in the world, and that's where Misawa is, and they would just happen to TDY out during snowstorms as well. So we are out there with our babies bundled in snowsuits while we're shoveling the walkways on base, because you have to when you live on base. It snows a lot. So there was lots of muttered words, I would say, about our husbands being in like sunny beaches while we're out here like peasants shoveling our sidewalks.
I always made sure to build Chuck D a huge sledding ramp in our front yard before I left, though.
And then it would turn to ice,
Oh,
and then
there
it
you
was
go. That's
dangerous
good.
where
Yeah,
like
dangerous.
it was awful. It was great for a couple days, and then it was just straight terrifying. So yeah, I mean, I didn't.
But from what you said, it sounds like, go ahead.
Oh, I was wondering, so Steph, was it easy to connect with a spouses club?
Yeah, so I've learned, I guess, that overseas, I kind of feel like your squadron spouses are a lot closer, especially if you're all forced to live on base. So in Misawa, if you're married, you have to live on base. And for us, that was like all of 3 streets. So we were really close to Misawa because the guys would TDY a lot, or they'd just work long days. So the wives would all get together with all the kids. We'd go to the park and bring some wine, and kids would play and we would hang out. And then stateside, it's a little different because everyone kind of can still have their own different life, you know? You can still do all your things you want to do in America. You live different parts of town. You're not really like required to be close together, like distance-wise, but still a great community as far as the squadron itself. I mean, I feel like the fighter squadrons, I don't really have anything else to compare it to, but it always feels like family as far as hanging out with the wives. It doesn't feel like, oh, I got to go hang out with my husband's work friends, like, oh, but it's all friends that you want to be friends with anyways. So I think we've lucked out so far, at least with that.
The Fallen Wings Foundation. Can you speak
Yeah,
about
so it is a foundation that actually this guy had been thinking about for a while, and he brought it up to me one night, the idea of the foundation, and kind of sat on it for just a little bit while I collected some more ideas. And then I woke up one day at 6 o'clock in the morning, and this guy's like typing away on the laptop. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's researching nonprofits and how you start one and what you do, and you know, what's out there, what's not out there, what can we connect with. So our mission is to help with U.S. Air Force aerial mishaps. So with the air crew, with family members, anyone like that. So it's something that I say I don't want to be busy with ever, because if we're busy with it, that usually means that something good has not happened.
So unlayer a little bit more of that onion. What is the specific mission? So what happens, and what is the response that you two partake in?
Perfect. Yeah, so our mission is the immediate and continued support for aerial mishap victims, and that's specific to the U.S. Air Force. Dude, it's a wide spectrum, but it also is a very specific vector, and that's kind of something that we hold ourselves to, right? And essentially, anytime there's an aerial mishap, we typically, as aviators, don't walk away with too many injuries. We tend to not walk away at all. And so basically from that, we are attempting to be the first line of support when any of these aerial mishaps happen. We're still fairly juvenile as a organization and as a nonprofit, and for the most part, we have yet to gain, I hesitate to call it, but yet to gain notoriety amongst the aviation community for the Air Force as far as being the support asset so far.
So huge mission. Yeah, Kenny's hit on it. I mean, it's hard not to. We've all been affected by friends that have passed, and it sucks, and it's horrible. And I feel like this is why, you know. And every time I see the Facebook update from Steph and Kenny sending out something, it sucks. But it's also you don't see anybody else doing it. So, bro, I truly thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for starting
Yeah.
that. Wow.
You bet, guys. And she gives me a lot more credit than where it was due. That morning that she's talking about, it was I was not Googling how to start a nonprofit. I was Googling, I need to help someone, and I want to do it by raising money fast. Enter, right? And that was kind of that furious typing, as I basically hand Charlie, our daughter, her iPad and say, look, Daddy's busy, go watch as much Baby Shark as you can handle right now.
How do you guys keep it together? And is it your faith? Is it your structure? What are the things that you guys know? Okay, I mean, you guys have a foundation where you very much know the danger of what your husband does. At the same time, you guys are able to let him go off to Australia. You can have wine with, the women in Japan, and you know that you're going to have a baby pop out in an extra year. How does that happen? How do you guys keep that foundation?
Yeah, okay.
What is the core that you
so
guys keep
definitely
strong?
For us, it's communication, I would say. Yeah. It is a crazy, hectic lifestyle for sure. But like I said before, it's kind of like all we know. So we don't really know any different. If I always joke that I have no idea what I would do if he worked a normal job and was home more. I feel like it would be really, really weird because we're used to that. Used to him working longer hours and being gone for little bits of time. So just the big thing for us is communication with our kids, communication with each other. Just kind of making sure that even though we might not always physically be together in the same room, but that we're always checking in on each other if he's gone, or if they're working late, I pack the kids up. We can go to the squadron and just at least lay eyes, see Daddy, maybe have a quick snack with him, and then head back home. Sometimes on night weeks, I put the kids in pajamas and we head out there and just kind of hang out for a little bit, make it normal. The squadron is literally like a second home. We've been lucky at both of our squadrons so far. It's been like that, where you aren't scared to go into his work or go into the bar, go into the squadron or anything. So you just go in, and Luke, our youngest, kind of roams the hallways and literally is in his own little world. And then Charlie is sup broing everybody, because that's what
yeah, she's sup broing, and everyone there has got candy, for the kids. And it's not uncommon to see in a fighter squadron that there's dogs.
What are fam flights, and what do the squadrons do for the family members?
Oh man, so fam flights in our aircraft, we only have a couple of the 2-seat models, the D model, the family model, like we like to call it. And most of the time, we take our coworkers up. So we think about our maintenance professionals, our air traffic controllers, our intel specialists, some of the folks who work within the squadron, multiple other functions and things of that nature, is when we most time bring them up. Every once in a while, we get to take up folks that work outside the squadron. Every once in a while, we get to take up civilians, things of that nature. But it's one of those really cool things where you just get to show people what a piece of your day looks like. And one of the things that I think behooves us a lot is if we show people what not just the flight looks like, but what a whole day looks like, especially when it comes to our coworkers that serve in multiple other functions across the squadron, say our maintenance professional or maybe our aircrew flight equipment technician. And one of the things that I find to be infinitely valuable is to show them that roughly for every hour of flight, there's anywhere from 2 to 8 hours of planning attached to that. And there's typically 1 to 6-ish hours of debrief attached to that as well. And so it's unfortunately not as you see in the movies where I just got done at the golf course and I pull up to my jet in my Corvette, I toss the crew chief the keys, throw on my my zipper suited sun god suit and hop in the aircraft and go break it, bring it back and toss the keys back, right? It's nowhere near where a typical day is. And so part of being able to do fam flights is not only incredible to give people that experience as a human, right? Because we're all just monkeys in a machine at this point, but also being able to showcase to the other professions that there is a lot going on that unfortunately is not glamorized by any means, nor should it.
Right. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a really cool thing that you all do.
Yeah. Do your kiddos know what you do? They're like, oh, Daddy is a fighter pilot.
Yes. So Charlie, our 5-year-old, knows that Daddy is a pilot. So anytime she sees an airplane, she now at this age can kind of figure out the distinguish between like the commercial airplanes versus the F-16. And now we're here in Phoenix, so now there's the F-35. So now Daddy flies any fighter-looking airplane. That's always Daddy. Luke really is not old enough. He doesn't really understand yet exactly what Daddy does, but Charlie's on it. And then, of course, a lot of our friends are pilots, so I'm almost positive she's convinced almost everyone is a fighter.
It's just
She hasn't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah.
No, to some extent, and it's really cool because both the squadrons we've been in have had multiple female pilots as well,
Oh.
which has been awesome for her to see because that just normalizes it for her. And the cool part about that is that she knows that being a pilot is kind of old news, so she's ready to be a space cadet, dude.
She is.
there you go.
Oh, really? That's pretty cool.
Yes, she tells us she's
Force.
going to go to space. Yep, and she's going to go to space with some snacks, hang out for a little bit, and then she'll come back and she'll babysit. That's
what she said.
a
She'll
life
babysit.
goal right
Oh
now.
my gosh, that is so cute.
Yeah.
That is actually really cute.
How old is Luke?
Luke is 2,
2. Oh
so
my
he turned
goodness.
2 in September. Yep.
Terrible 2s, huh?
Terrible twos.
Yeah, he's
So you
there.
guys are at a very interesting point in your career, Kenny, where you're coming up on that 10-year. You're about ready to put on light major. So what does that mean for you career-wise, and what are you thinking about doing?
At this point in the career, this assignment that I'm on right now will be roughly 4 years, and it'll take me to the end of my 10-year contract, essentially, right? Think of it like a sports contract. And that will bring me to the point where I'm no longer contractually obligated to the Air Force. And so that allows me a lot of opportunity. One, to stay in on essentially, like if you think of like a phone contract, right? Stay in like on a month-to-month basis, essentially. Or I can re-sign a new contract, which may or may not come with a signing bonus, depending on what you do. It also opens up multiple opportunities, like jumping into the Guard or the reserves as well. Still flying F-16s or, maybe another aircraft. But at that point, we have the opportunity to do so.
Okay. In full disclosure, I mean, you don't have to answer this one, but I do kind of want to ask it and see how you do. With the stream of fatalities and deaths that we've been seeing from training mishaps, what do you think that's attributed to outside of training? Do you think there's anything culture related inside the Air Force that needs to be looked at, or do you think that it's just time and tempo and it's a phase? What do you think?
Yeah, so dude, I would be lying if I would told you that it didn't have anything to do with any culture anywhere. Because let's be honest, dude, there's going to be good apples, there's going to be bad apples out there, and some people are going to make decisions based on emotion. Some people are going to make decisions based on logic, and some people just aren't going to make a decision which may lead to good or bad endings, right? So I think that there is a very, very small piece of this that has to do with culture. Very small. I would venture to say so minuscule it's probably isolated to one place in the entire planet. Not saying that is a place that I know about. I'm saying that there's probably that few of it going on, right? But what you have begun to see is now that I've been able to see what it's like in the CAF at a combat coded unit through a training unit in the B course at Holloman, and now staying in a training unit here at Luke, I believe that what we are seeing is a restructuring of what people are considering basics. Undergraduate pilot training teaches you administration and instruments for the most part. Well, okay, that's great, but at what point do those become more advanced and you push them to the next training? And so honestly, that is where the basic course across all platforms are beginning to see where is the basic course stretching into what a combat Air Force squadron can and will teach this new young wingman, basically. And so as those things begin to become more apparent through trend data and then through obvious two-way communications up and down the whole training enterprise, honestly, man, I think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to produce more than what we can train to. And when I say that, I mean that we have a lot of bias personally across the aviation community. And sometimes that bias or that social or cultural norm that we have had as far as what to expect from a single person, a single pilot, a single aviator of any caliber is changing. And so I believe that a lot of this has to do with a lack of open communication and open understanding of people's aptitude.
Wow. Okay. So there's no immediate fix. That sounds like that's super internal and has to happen from the inside out. And yeah, looks like we're kind of where we're at now. Well, you two, I really appreciate you for your time. I mean, this has been a great interview. I really enjoy talking about the serious side of things, and it's so cool that you two are so knees deep in such an active operational role. Most of the people that I've talked to have been in a support or guard role, so to be, the tip of the spear, power to you, man. It's really cool. You're training and leading from the front, and I think that's awesome. So
I wanted to shout out the rest of our team on the foundation, because we definitely don't do this by ourselves by any means. We are not smart enough, if I'm being honest, to run that whole thing just by ourselves. So we have our great friend Janae, who's also a fellow Beaver, go BEAVS, and she's amazing. She helps with literally all the things. We also have our great friend Matt, and he is, the best personality to have as our social guy, really. He does all the things, he talks to all the people, he's just got a great personality, he's perfect for that role. And then we have Josh, and he kills it any way he can, really. So absolutely. Our whole team, hi to you guys, thanks for everything that you do.
So if you visit fallenwingsfoundation.org, you'll be able to see a lot of what we're about, meet our team, and then you'll be able to support us both financially. You'll be able to buy swag, and you'll be able to join our team as well. We are always looking for folks, onesie twosies, to help with quite a few things. Obviously, this is a massive team effort, and we all have day jobs as well. But fallenwingsfoundation.org, and you can get yourself hooked up with a bunch of swag.